welcome to our deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking closely at Gerrit-Jan Gorter's time as mayor of Zeewolde in the Netherlands.
18 years. Quite a tenure.
It is, and we've got some really incredible sources for this one.
First-hand accounts.
From people who work directly with him.
Exactly.
So this is going to be a fascinating look, I think, into how he led this community through so much change.
Yeah, and what makes these sources so valuable is that they go beyond just giving us, the dates and the events.
Right.
They actually give us a sense of his leadership style, how he shaped the town, but also how those experiences shaped him.
Yeah, that comes through right away.
It does.
The sources paint this picture of Zeewolde as a place that's really they want to hold on to that small town feel.
Right.
They talk about peace, space, and greenery.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this almost absurd description of the early town council.
Oh, yeah.
As a puppet show. It made me laugh out loud when I read that.
Yeah, what does that even look like?
So, can you kind of shed some light on that? What was the political landscape like that Gorter was walking into?
Well, even though we're talking about a village, it sounds like he was stepping into an environment that was already pretty politically charged.
Yeah. Everyone
knows everyone, but they also all have very strong opinions about the future of their community.
Right.
And then we have to think about, the Dutch political system itself with coalition governments. Building consensus is essential. Mm-hmm. And it takes a certain kind of leader to navigate that.
So not just herding cats.
No.
But cats with very specific ideas about which direction they want to go.
Exactly. And that brings us to, one of those really defining moments of his time as mayor.
Yeah.
The 2015 Asylum Center controversy.
This one's interesting because it's not just local politics, right?
No, this gets national attention.
It does, and we even have Geert Wilders, who, at the time was a really prominent national figure known for his anti-immigration stance.
Right.
He shows up at the town council meeting.
Wow.
To oppose the asylum center.
I can't even imagine the pressure.
It must have been intense.
Yeah.
But this is where we really see Gorter's approach come through in the sources. Mm-hmm. He's described as keeping a cool head throughout all of this.
Right.
While trying to balance the residents' concerns with this idea of doing what was just and humane.
And that's a tricky balance, right?
Yeah, so how do you actually do that? How do you lead with a cool head when things are that heated?
It's more than just not panicking. It's about understanding all sides of a complex issue. Yeah. In this case, Gorter really listened to what the residents were saying about the asylum center, their fears, their concerns.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he also emphasized that moral obligation to help people who are in need.
Yeah.
So he really tried to find solutions that addressed everyone's needs.
It sounds like he had this knack for finding that balance.
Yeah.
That leadership's not just about making the decision, but about understanding how that decision impacts people.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another interesting event.
Okay.
The Scouting Land Code project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one is interesting because this time he's facing opposition from both residents and political parties.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just a simple ideological divide.
So how does Gorter's whole approach to connection play out in this situation?
Yeah.
Is it smooth sailing because he's all about building bridges?
Right.
Or did he have to kind of adjust his tactics?
This is where I think the sources get really interesting because they actually start to analyze how Gorter operated.
Yeah.
And they talk about his, quote, combination of decisiveness and empathy. So it wasn't just about making everyone happy all the time.
Right.
It was about making tough choices.
Yeah.
But still acknowledging the perspectives of those who disagreed.
So connection for him wasn't just about being everyone's best friend.
No.
It was about engaging with the tough stuff.
Exactly.
Even the disagreements.
Right.
And trying to find that common ground.
Yeah, and the Scouting Land Code project is a perfect example of that.
Okay.
He could have easily just dug in his heels and said, this is happening.
Right.
But instead, he actually sought out the concerns of the residents and the political opponents.
Okay.
He really tried to find ways to modify the project to address their anxieties while still moving forward with that overall vision.
And the fact that this project did get approved eventually.
It did.
Even with all that pushback at the beginning, seems to say something about how effective his approach was.
It does, doesn't it? It wasn't about steamrolling anyone.
Yeah.
It was about finding a path forward.
Right.
That considered all those viewpoints while staying true to the goal of creating this space for scouting activities that would benefit the whole community.
Okay, so this idea of connection really does feel like it's at the heart of his leadership style.
It does.
But it's not just be nice.
No.
Right. There's a lot more to it.
Definitely. There's a lot of strategic thinking involved.
Yeah.
And navigating those complex situations.
What I'm really curious about is how this connection played out in those day-to-day interactions with residents.
Yeah.
We know he had an open door policy.
Right.
He was accessible. Mm-hmm. But how did those things actually build community in a village that was growing so rapidly?
That's where the sources really bring him to life.
Okay.
Because they go beyond just saying, oh, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
And actually paint a picture of what it was like to work with him, to interact with him.
Yeah.
They describe a leader who was really present, really engaged, and not just stuck in his office making decisions from afar.
He understood that building a community was about more than just policy.
Absolutely.
It was about those relationships with the people. Mm-hmm. How did he do that, though? Did he have specific tactics, or was it more about his personality?
Well, that's a great question, and one that I think we'll get into as we go further into Gorter's time as mayor.
Before we do that, though, there's one thing that's really been bugging me.
Oh.
The sources mention this unrealized 40-meter building planned for Gorter Island. It's just a quick mention.
Right.
But it raises all these questions like, what was this project? Right. Was it a major setback for Gorter? A missed opportunity?
Yeah.
Or was it something else entirely?
It's frustrating because the sources don't give us a lot of details. It's like this little loose thread. Yeah. This hint that even a leader like Gorter, who had so much success, faced obstacles that maybe he just couldn't overcome.
So even with all this emphasis on connection and collaboration, there were still projects that fell through the cracks.
It seems so, yeah.
Maybe this shows us the limits of that approach.
Perhaps.
Or maybe it's just a reminder that leadership is as much about setbacks as it is about successes.
It is, isn't it?
Makes you wonder what happened with this specific project.
It does.
Was it political opposition? Funding issues? Or something else entirely?
Hard to say without more information.
Yeah.
But definitely something to think about as we continue exploring his time as mayor.
Oh, I'm definitely eager to see what else we can uncover.
Me too.
But I think for now it's time to kind of step back.
Okay.
And reflect on what we've learned so far.
Right.
We've seen how Gorter dealt with, Dutch politics. How he approached these challenging issues like the asylum center.
Right.
And how his focus on connection really played out in these real world scenarios.
Absolutely.
But the most intriguing question I think we're left with is, what does it all mean? What can we as, listeners take away from all of this?
That's a question worth thinking about carefully.
Yeah.
But I do think that Gorter's story is a great example of what leadership can be when it's grounded in empathy and understanding. A genuine desire to bring people together even when they disagree.
That's a really powerful message.
It is.
Especially today when it feels like leadership is so often about division, confrontation.
Exactly.
Gorter reminds us that there's another way. One that emphasizes collaboration, communication, and a real respect for different perspectives.
That's a great point, and it's actually something the sources talk about directly.
Okay.
They say that Gorter's approach felt almost radical at a time when it's so easy to just retreat into our own little echo chambers and demonize anyone who disagrees with us.
Yeah.
But he didn't shy away from those difficult conversations or the controversial issues.
You really didn't?
No, he actually sought out those different perspectives.
Wow.
And worked to find that common ground even when it seemed impossible.
That takes a lot of courage.
It does.
Especially with something as emotionally charged as that asylum center situation.
Yeah, there was a real risk of backlash on people who didn't agree with him.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that he wasn't just passively listening.
Right.
He was actively engaging with those opposing views, asking questions, trying to really understand the concerns, the motivations, and then looking for those ways to bridge that divide.
It was more than tolerance or acceptance.
Definitely.
It was genuine engagement. A willingness to find common ground.
Exactly. And that's where I think we see the real depth of his leadership.
Okay.
It wasn't just about saying the right thing or making everyone happy.
Right.
It was this deep-seated belief in the power of human connection.
Yeah.
And a willingness to put that belief into action even when it was hard.
And it wasn't just those big gestures or sweeping changes. The sources highlight those small but powerful things.
Yeah.
The open door policy. His willingness to be accessible to people. That focus on those personal connections.
Absolutely. Sometimes the most effective leadership happens at that ground level. In those everyday interactions.
Right.
Just being present, approachable, and showing that genuine concern for the people you serve.
So it seems like Gorter's legacy is one of navigating those complex situations with both strength and heart.
It really does.
He was decisive when he needed to be.
Right.
But never at the expense of compassion or empathy.
And that's a powerful lesson.
It is.
It's a reminder that leadership isn't about choosing between being tough or being kind.
Right.
It's about finding that balance between the two.
Yeah. You can be principled and pragmatic.
Exactly.
Strong and compassionate.
And that's something I think we need more of today.
Definitely. But it also makes me wonder,
yeah,
did this focus on connection ever backfire?
That's a great question.
Were there times when it slowed things down? Or led to compromises that maybe weren't in the best interest of the whole community?
That's something that the sources do address, actually.
Okay.
They acknowledge that his emphasis on consensus building could sometimes delay those decisions.
Yeah.
And there were times when people criticized him for being too willing to appease certain groups.
Okay.
Even when maybe their demands weren't entirely reasonable.
So it wasn't a perfect system.
No system is perfect.
Right.
There were definitely trade-offs.
But it seems like for the most part, the benefits outweighed the drawbacks.
That seems to be the consensus.
Okay.
At least among the people who worked with him.
Right.
They describe a leader who was deeply committed to the well-being of his community and who really believed that the best way to achieve that was through collaboration and understanding.
Which brings up another interesting question.
Okay.
Can Gorter's approach, this connection emphasis, be a blueprint for leadership today?
Yeah.
In our world that feels so divided?
It's a good question.
Or was it just something unique to him and to Zeewolde?
That's what we're left with, right?
It is.
And it's something we all have to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tempting to just say, yes, of course.
Right.
But replicating what he did isn't easy. It requires us to step outside of our comfort zones, to challenge our own assumptions.
Right.
And to engage with people who are different from us in really meaningful ways.
And to resist oversimplifying things.
Yes.
Or demonizing people who disagree with us.
Exactly.
It's about acknowledging that nuance.
Right.
The gray areas. The messy realities of how we interact with each other.
It's about understanding that there's always more to the story than we initially see. And believing that even with our differences, there's always that possibility of connection and understanding.
And that brings us back to that 40-meter building.
Ah, yes.
That never got built.
Right.
We don't know the full story.
No.
But it is a reminder that even the most successful leaders face setbacks.
They do.
Disappointments. And maybe even make decisions they later regret.
It's part of the process.
It is.
It suggests that even Gorter's approach, as effective as it was, wasn't a guarantee of success.
Right.
There were limits to what he could do. Obstacles he couldn't overcome. And compromises that maybe he didn't like making.
It's a good reminder that leadership isn't about always winning or always having the answers.
It's not a straight line to success. It's about being willing to learn and adapt. And to keep going even when things don't go to plan.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
We've looked at the highs and lows, the successes and setbacks, the strengths, and maybe even some weaknesses.
Right, we've got a really well-rounded picture of him as a leader.
But what really shines through is his commitment to connecting with people.
Absolutely.
And to building a stronger community.
And that's worth celebrating, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It reminds us that leadership can be a force for good.
Right.
A way to bring people together. And create a more just and compassionate world.
Absolutely.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more thing I want to touch on.
Okay.
All of the sources agree that he left Zeewolde a better place than he found it.
They do.
But what does better actually mean in this context? Is it about economic growth?
Right.
Improved infrastructure? Or is it something more, something less tangible?
That's a really great question. And it gets to the heart of, what we value in a leader.
Right.
Is it about those concrete outcomes?
Yeah.
Or is it about creating a community where people feel valued, heard, and connected?
Right, where they belong and have a shared purpose.
Is it about building a place where people are proud to live? A place where they can thrive and contribute?
I think it's probably a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's about the impact that a leader has on the people they serve.
Right.
Did they make a difference?
Yeah.
Did they leave a positive mark?
Did they make people feel seen?
Exactly.
Did they inspire hope? Did they leave that community stronger and more connected than they found it?
Those are the questions we should be asking, not just about our political leaders, but about anyone in a position of influence. And I think those are the questions that Gorter's legacy invites us to consider.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is, isn't it?
It's not just about what a leader achieves, but about the legacy they leave behind, the ripple effects of their action.
Right.
The things that define their impact that you can't really measure.
Exactly. The stories people tell.
Yeah.
Long after they're gone.
And that's something we can all think about.
We can.
Regardless of our role or position. What kind of legacy are we building?
Yeah.
What impact are we having on the people around us?
That's a good thought to leave our listeners with.
It is.
As we head into the final part of our deep dive.
We'll be back to explore the broader implications of Gorter's leadership. And what it might mean for the future of our own communities.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Welcome back to our deep dive into the leadership of Jan Gorter, former mayor of Zeewolde.
It's great to be back.
Before we went on break, we were talking about how Gorter's connection approach played out, in his decision-making in those day-to-day interactions. Right. And what really struck me is that he seemed to put humanity and vision ahead of just sticking to the rules.
It's refreshing, isn't it?
It is.
It's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff. The bureaucracy, the politics, all the things on the to-do list.
Right.
But Gorter seemed to always keep the bigger picture in mind.
Yeah.
The people, the community, the future he was helping to build.
And as you said before, that's a really important lesson.
It is.
For anyone in a leadership position.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you're running a town or leading a team at work.
It's about remembering that your decisions affect real people.
Exactly.
It's recognizing that leadership isn't just about having authority.
Right.
It's about understanding the needs of the people you serve. And Gorter really seemed to get that.
Yeah, the sources really highlight that ability.
And do.
To build bridges.
Yeah.
And not just between political parties.
Right.
But between people with totally different viewpoints and backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And that feels so important today.
It does.
When we're facing so much division, so much polarization in society.
It's a really timely point.
It is.
And it's something the sources actually address directly. They talk about how Gorter's approach almost felt radical. Because it's so easy to just retreat into our own little bubbles.
Right.
And demonize anyone who sees things differently.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that.
He didn't.
He didn't shy away from those tough conversations or those controversial issues.
Yeah.
He actually sought out those different perspectives.
Wow.
And really tried to find common ground, even when it felt impossible.
That takes a lot of courage.
It does.
Especially with something like the asylum center.
Oh, absolutely.
There was a real risk of backlash there.
There was.
From people who disagreed with his approach.
And it's important to remember, too, that he wasn't just listening to those opposing views.
Right.
He was really engaging with them.
Yeah.
Asking questions. Trying to understand those underlying concerns, the motivations.
Yeah.
And then looking for ways to actually bridge the gap.
So it was more than tolerance or acceptance.
He was, yeah.
It was genuine engagement. A real desire to find that common ground.
And that's, I think, where we see the depth of his leadership.
Okay.
It wasn't about saying all the right things or making everybody happy. It was a deep belief in human connection.
Yeah.
And a willingness to put that into action.
Right.
Even when it was hard.
And it wasn't just those big sweeping changes.
No.
The sources emphasize those smaller actions.
They do.
The open door policy.
Right.
Being accessible to residents.
Yeah.
That focus on building those one-on-one connections.
It's about those everyday interactions.
Exactly.
Like being present, being approachable,
Yeah.
showing that you actually care about the people you serve.
So it seems like his legacy is one of navigating those complexities.
It does, yeah.
With both strength and heart.
Right. He could be decisive when he had to be,
But
never at the expense of compassion or empathy.
That's an important lesson for all of us.
It is. It really is.
You can be principled and pragmatic, strong and compassionate.
That's something I think we need more of in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also makes me wonder,
did
this focus on connection ever backfire?
Interesting question.
Were there times when it maybe slowed things down?
Right.
Or led to compromises that weren't good for the whole community?
That's actually something the sources talk about.
Yeah,
they acknowledge that his focus on consensus building could sometimes cause delays.
Yeah.
And there were definitely times when he was criticized for being too willing to appease certain groups, even when their demands were maybe unreasonable.
So it wasn't a perfect system.
No system is perfect.
Right.
There were definitely some trade-offs.
But it sounds like for the most part, the benefits outweighed those drawbacks.
That seems to be the general consensus.
Okay.
From the people who worked with him.
Yeah.
They describe a leader who was completely dedicated to the community.
Right.
And really believed that the best way to achieve that was through collaboration and understanding.
It makes you wonder, though.
What's that?
Can his approach, this emphasis on connection, be a blueprint for leadership today?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Can it work in our world, a world that feels so divided?
Yeah, or was it something unique to him?
Right.
And to Zeewolde?
I think we all have to grapple with that question.
Yeah.
It's easy to say yes.
It is.
But it's not that simple.
It's not.
Replicating what Gorter did takes a lot of work.
Right.
It means stepping outside our comfort zone.
Right.
Challenging our own assumptions.
Right.
And engaging with people who are different from us in real and meaningful ways.
And resisting the urge to simplify complex issues.
Yes.
Or to demonize those who disagree with us.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the nuance.
Right.
The gray areas. Those messy realities of how we interact with each other.
And it's about believing that.
Yeah.
Even with all those differences. We can still find common ground.
Yeah, there's always potential for connection.
There is.
And understanding.
Absolutely.
And, this brings us back to that 40-meter building.
Yes.
That never got built.
Right.
We still don't know the whole story.
No, we don't.
But it's a good reminder.
It is.
That even the most successful leaders face setbacks.
They do.
They run into obstacles. And they have to make compromises that they maybe don't want to make.
It's a reminder that leadership isn't a straight line to success.
It's not.
There are going to be detours, unexpected turns.
Right.
It's about being willing to learn, adapt, and to keep going when things get tough.
This deep dive has been really thought-provoking.
It has.
We've explored those highs and lows of his leadership.
We have.
The successes and setbacks, his strengths, and maybe even some weaknesses.
Yeah, we've really gotten to know him as a leader.
But one thing that's clear is his absolute commitment to connecting with people.
It really is, isn't it?
And to building a stronger community.
And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
It is.
It's a reminder that leadership can be a force for good.
Yeah.
A way to bring people together.
Right.
And to create a world that's more just, more compassionate.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
There's one more thing I want to touch on.
What's that?
The sources all seem to agree that Gorter left Zeewolde a better place.
They do, yeah.
Than he found it. But what does better actually mean?
That's a great question.
Is it economic growth?
Right.
Improved infrastructure? Or is it something more?
Yeah. Something less tangible.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It gets to the heart of what we value in a leader.
It does.
Is it about those concrete outcomes?
Right.
Or is it about creating a community where people feel valued?
Yeah.
Heard and connected?
Absolutely.
Like they belong. Like they have a shared purpose.
It's about building a place where people are proud to live.
Right.
A place where they can thrive and contribute.
I think it's probably a combination of all of those things.
I think so too.
But ultimately, it comes down to the impact a leader has on the people they serve.
Absolutely.
Did they make a difference?
Right. Did they leave a positive mark on the community?
Did they make people feel seen? Did they inspire hope?
Exactly.
Did they leave the community stronger and more connected?
Those are the important questions.
Yeah.
And those are the questions that I think Gorter's legacy invites us to consider.
Wow. That's powerful.
It really is.
It's not just about what a leader accomplishes.
No.
But about the legacy they leave behind.
Right. The ripple effects.
Yeah.
The intangible things that define their impact.
The stories that people tell about them.
Exactly.
Long after they're gone.
And that's something we can all reflect on. No matter what our role is.
Right.
What kind of legacy are we building?
Yeah.
What impact are we having on the world around us?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with.
It is.
As we head into the final part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
We'll be back to explore the broader implications of Gorter's leadership and what it all might mean for the future of our communities. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about Gerrit Jan Gorter and his time as mayor of Zeewolde. And this idea of connection has really been front and center.
It has, hasn't it?
It makes me wonder if that kind of leadership is almost a lost art these days.
It's definitely a quality that we don't see enough.
Especially in our current political climate.
Yeah. Everywhere you look, it's all about division.
Right.
Us versus them. Left versus right.
It can be exhausting.
It really can.
Yeah.
And it often feels like we're not even really listening to each other, just talking past each other.
Not trying to understand different perspectives.
Exactly.
But that's what's so interesting about Gorter. He didn't pretend those divisions didn't exist.
He didn't.
He acknowledged them, engaged with them.
Yeah.
And he really sought out that common ground.
He did. And the sources we've been looking at really show us how he did that.
So instead of just digging in our heels,
right?
What if we actually tried to understand where the other side is coming from?
It's a radical thought, isn't it?
It kind of is.
But imagine if our leaders
Yeah.
focused on building bridges instead of walls,
Right.
on finding solutions instead of just scoring points.
Imagine a world where we valued empathy and understanding more than ideology.
It sounds utopian,
It does.
but maybe Gorter's story shows us that it's possible.
It might not be easy,
No, it won't be.
but it's got to be worth striving for.
It absolutely is. And maybe it starts with us.
Yeah.
We may not be mayors or presidents,
Right.
but we can choose to be bridge builders.
Exactly. In our own community.
How do we do that? It's about listening with an open mind,
Okay.
engaging with people who see things differently, and looking for that common ground.
It's about remembering that connection isn't just a nice idea.
It's not.
It's a human need.
We all need it,
Yeah, we all crave it.
even if we don't always show it.
Right.
And when we deny ourselves that connection, we really do it at our own peril.
I love that. And I think that's especially relevant today.
It is, isn't it?
You know, as we face these huge challenges.
Climate change, political instability.
Yeah, all of it.
We need leaders who can bring us together,
We do.
not tear us apart.
Leaders who can inspire hope,
Right.
foster collaboration, and remind us that we're all in this together.
Exactly. No matter our differences.
And Gorter's story shows us that that kind of leadership is possible.
It does.
It may not always be easy or glamorous,
No, it won't be.
but it's so important
It is, and it's something we can all work towards.
Right.
In our own ways.
in our own communities.
It starts with being willing to listen,
Yeah.
to understand, to connect.
To remember that we're part of something bigger.
Exactly.
Well, this deep dive into Gerrit Jan Gorter's life and work has been truly inspiring.
It has.
It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about power or authority.
No,
It's about something much deeper.
right. That human connection.
Yeah.
Building a better future together.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.